They thought they could walk away. They thought betrayal, lies, and cruelty would fade into the background of life, as if nothing had ever happened. But here's the truth most people forget. The heaviest punishment is not the anger you throw back at them, it's the guilt they carry inside. Guilt doesn't need a courtroom. It doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't even need you to speak. It's a silent sentence, one that follows them everywhere. It whispers at night when they're alone. It lingers at the dinner table when the conversation grows quiet. And it resurfaces in those still moments, when distractions can no longer hide what they've done. Think about it. You don't have to raise your voice. You don't have to fight. You don't even have to seek revenge. Because guilt is already doing the work for you. It's not some distant karma waiting years down the road. It's psychological justice unfolding right now. I remember a story a woman once told me. Her ex thought he had gotten away with everything, cheating, lying, trying to smear her name. He acted confident, like he had won, but she didn't fight back. She didn't waste her energy proving him wrong. She simply moved on with her life. She built new friendships, rediscovered her passions, and grew into a stronger version of herself. And here's the twist. Years later, he came back, not to apologize, but just to check, to see if she still hated him. You know why? Because the guilt was still there. She had already let go. He hadn't, and that simple difference destroyed him more than any revenge ever could. That's the power you hold. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to keep replaying the story. The truth is, guilt never lets go of the people who caused harm. They can run. They can distract themselves. They can put on a mask of confidence, but deep inside, they know. And that knowledge eats away at them piece by piece. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher, once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." When someone betrays, when someone wounds another, their soul is stained by those choices. And no matter how far they try to run, that stain follows them. So let me ask you, why waste your time chasing revenge? When life has already set justice in motion, why keep looking back? When the real victory is in moving forward, stronger, calmer, freer? This isn't about being passive. It's about understanding true strength. Anyone can lash out in anger. Anyone can fight back in the heat of the moment. But the kind of strength that Stoicism teaches, the kind that transforms your life, is the ability to stand still in peace, while their guilt destroys them silently. And here's the beauty of it: your silence, your confidence, your peace, that's not weakness. That's the most powerful form of revenge you could ever have. Because it reminds them every single day of what they lost, of what they destroyed, and of the person they can never touch again. So as we begin this journey, remember this. You don't need to seek justice with your hands. You don't need to prove anything with your words. Your peace is the punishment. Their guilt is the prison. And that, my friend, is the kind of justice that never fails. Guilt doesn't shout, it doesn't slam the door like anger, it doesn't scream like hatred. Instead, it waits, quiet, invisible, but relentless. And that's what makes guilt far more dangerous than any punishment you could ever design. Because while anger fades, and even revenge eventually loses its fire, guilt is the silent executioner. It doesn't strike once and move on. It gnaws at a person day after day, night after night, until the weight becomes unbearable. Think about the human mind for a second. Our minds are wired for balance, for emotional stability. We crave peace the way our bodies crave oxygen. But when someone betrays their own values, when they hurt another person in ways they know are wrong, the subconscious doesn't let it go. Even if they smile in public, even if they put on a mask of confidence, their inner self remembers, and it keeps score. That's why guilt isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It's patient. It lingers. And when the moment is right, it tightens its grip like a noose. That's why I call it the silent executioner. It doesn't kill all at once. It weakens slowly, day after day, piece by piece. It strips away a person's peace of mind, their relationships, even their health. I once knew a man who betrayed his closest friend in business. To the world, he looked successful, new clients, new city, new opportunities. But behind the scenes, he couldn't sleep without a drink in his hand. He jumped from distraction to distraction because quiet moments terrified him. Why? Because quiet moments left him alone with his own conscience. And this isn't just philosophy, it's psychology. Psychologists have a term for this inner war: cognitive dissonance. It's the mental discomfort that comes when a person's actions clash with their values. When they claim to be a good person, but deep down they know they've caused harm. You've probably seen it yourself. Someone wrongs you, and then spends months, or even years, trying too hard to justify it. They rewrite the story so they're the victim. They tell mutual friends their version of events. They talk more about you than you ever talk about them. Why? Because the louder they speak, the more they're trying to drown out the quiet voice inside that won't let them rest. And here's what's fascinating. Guilt doesn't stay the same size. It grows. What begins as a whisper becomes a constant hum. Then it turns into a heavy weight pressing down on their chest every day. Left unresolved, it seeps into every corner of life. Studies show that unresolved guilt contributes to anxiety, depression, even self-sabotage. It's the mind's way of punishing itself when the truth is denied. Let me ask you this. How many times have you looked at someone who once hurt you and thought, they seem so confident? Do they even think about what they did? The answer is yes. Maybe not every moment, but often enough that it shapes their choices, their mood, their health. You may not see it, but it's there. Marcus Aurelius, one of the great Stoic philosophers, said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." What does that mean? It means you can't escape the stain of your actions. If you harm someone, if you lie, if you betray, those choices color your soul. And you carry that color everywhere you go. No amount of pretending can wash it off. That's why guilt is the most merciless punishment. It's not something you give them. It's something they give themselves. And the more they resist it, the stronger it becomes. They can run across the world, start a new life, bury themselves in work or new relationships, but the guilt follows. Like a shadow, like a backpack full of stones. It grows heavier over time, not lighter. And here's the crucial part for you. This is why you don't need to chase revenge. You don't need to spend your energy proving them wrong. Because guilt is already at work, every hour of every day, in ways you'll never see but they'll never escape. So the next time you wonder if they regret what they did, remember this. The regret is there. The guilt is there. It may be silent, but silence doesn't mean absence. In fact, silence is where guilt does its most devastating work. Section 2. The signs and effects of guilt. Here's the thing about guilt. People rarely admit it on the surface. They might look strong. They might even convince others that they're fine. But if you look closer, the signs are always there. Think about it. Someone wrongs you, and instead of moving forward quietly, what do? They keep talking. They tell their version of the story again and again. They rewrite the narrative so they become the victim. They speak loudly. They defend themselves aggressively. And they attack your character when you're not even in the room to defend yourself. Why do they do this? Because deep inside, they're not trying to convince the world. They're trying to convince themselves. They're drowning out the voice inside that whispers, "You know what you did." That's how guilt works. It doesn't arrive like an earthquake. It starts as a whisper. Then it grows. At first, it's just an echo in the back of their mind. But over time, it becomes a constant hum. A weight on their chest. A shadow that follows them into every corner of their life. And here's the devastating part. Guilt doesn't just live in the mind. It spreads. It takes root in the body. Research shows that unresolved guilt is linked to chronic anxiety, depression, and even self-destructive behaviors. It shows up in sleepless nights, in nervous energy, in strained relationships. It's not just emotional, it's physical. The mind punishes the body when the truth is denied. Let me give you a real-life example. A woman once told me about her marriage. Her husband cheated, lied, and then tried to turn the story against her. She didn't fight back. She didn't spend her days trying to expose him or prove herself right. She chose silence. She chose peace. She focused on building her own life, new friends, new hobbies, new confidence. And here's what happened. Years later, he reached out, not with an apology, not with humility, but just to check, to see if she still hated him. Why? Because he couldn't let go. He still carried the guilt. She had already dropped it, moved on, and built a better life. But for him, the guilt was still alive, haunting him, gnawing at him like a chain he couldn't break. That's the cruel beauty of guilt. You don't have to feed it. You don't have to remind them. Their own conscience does that for you. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. When you stop reacting, when you stop chasing closure, you give them no target. And that's when guilt becomes their loudest companion. So let me ask you, have you ever seen someone who wronged you behave almost restless? Maybe they over-explain themselves to people who didn't ask. Maybe they seem obsessed with how they're perceived. Maybe they can't stop bringing up your name. Those are the cracks showing. That's guilt trying to break through the walls they've built. And it doesn't stay small. Left unresolved, guilt snowballs. It turns into anxiety that never rests, into depression that drains every ounce of energy, into behaviors that sabotage their own success. They might drink more. They might ruin relationships. They might push away the very people who could have helped them. Why? Because guilt doesn't just punish, it isolates. That's why your silence is so powerful. When you choose peace instead of revenge, you're not letting them off the hook. You're handing them over to the harshest judge they'll ever face, their own conscience. The woman who walked away from her husband's betrayal didn't win because she exposed him. She won because she stopped carrying the weight. She allowed him to be alone with his guilt. And in the end, that punishment was far heavier than anything she could have designed. This is what Stoicism teaches us. You don't control what others do. You only control your response. And when your response is calm detachment, you step out of the role of victim and into the role of victor. Because while they battle their conscience, you are building your peace. So remember, guilt has a voice. It starts as a whisper, but it grows into a roar. And no matter how hard they try to silence it, they can't. It affects their mind, their body, their relationships, their future. They may pretend, but they can't escape. And that, my friend, is why you never need to waste another second chasing revenge. Their guilt is already delivering the justice. Section 3. The price they pay. You might wonder sometimes, do they ever think about what they did to me? Do they ever feel the weight of it? The answer is yes, because guilt doesn't clock out. It doesn't take weekends off. It follows them everywhere they go. When they're driving alone, it's sitting in the passenger seat. When they eat in silence, it's right there at the table. When they lay down to sleep, it slips under the covers with them. And the cruelest part? The more they try to run from it, the tighter it clings. Avoiding you doesn't free them. In fact, it does the opposite. Every effort to erase you from their world only turns into a reminder of why they can't face you. Blocking you on social media, cutting ties with mutual friends, refusing to go to places you once went together, it's not freedom. It's a prison they've built themselves. Because in that avoidance, guilt grows. And guilt doesn't need much to resurface. A song on the radio, the smell of a familiar perfume, a street corner where you once walked together, a photo they thought they had thrown away. Suddenly, like a flash of lightning, they're back in that moment, the lie they told, the betrayal they carried out, the look on your face when they hurt you. These triggers don't fade with time. In fact, they become sharper, because the more they resist them, the more powerful they return. Think of it like this. Guilt is a backpack filled with stones. At first, they might not notice the weight. They convince themselves they can carry it. They tell themselves it's nothing. But as days turn into months, and months into years, the load becomes unbearable. The straps dig deeper into their shoulders. The weight grinds them down. And no matter how far they walk, the bag is still there. Heavier, heavier, heavier. And of course, they try to escape it. They'll look for ways to numb the pain. Some drown it in alcohol. Others bury it under drugs. Or throw themselves into work. Or rush into new relationships just to prove they've moved on. But here's the truth. These are nothing more than temporary band-aids on a wound that won't close. I've seen it firsthand. A man who betrayed his best friend thought he could silence his guilt with money, with travel, with noise. But the more he piled on distractions, the louder guilt became. At night, when everything grew quiet, the thoughts hit harder. Because guilt doesn't go away when you run, it waits patiently. And when the silence comes, it pounces. The Stoics understood this deeply. Seneca once said, "A guilty mind is full of turmoil." And you can see it play out in real life. The turmoil might not show up in public speeches or social media posts, but it leaks out in nervous laughter, restless energy, sudden anger, and sleepless nights. Their life may look fine on the surface, but beneath it, the storm is raging. So what's the price they pay? It's not just the memory of what they did. It's the constant burden of carrying it. The paranoia that others might find out. The restless energy of trying to escape themselves. The exhausting search for relief that never lasts. And here's the part you must understand. Their suffering is not your responsibility. You don't have to chase them down for closure. You don't have to design punishment. Life has already done that for you. Their own conscience is the jailer, and guilt is the cell. Meanwhile, you are free. When you let go, when you stop replaying the story in your head, you're no longer the one carrying the weight. They are. Every mile they walk, every night they close their eyes, that backpack of stones gets heavier. And one day, it will crush them, not because you demanded justice, but because justice was already built into the fabric of their own mind. So the next time you wonder if they've forgotten, remember this. Guilt doesn't fade. It multiplies. The harder they try to bury it, the deeper it burrows, and the more they resist, the heavier the price becomes. That's why your silence is not weakness. It's strength. Because while they're wasting energy running from the truth, you're moving forward into peace. While they're trapped in the prison of their own making, you're free to build a new life untouched by their shadows. That, my friend, is the real price they pay. Not because you forced it, but because guilt never lets them go. Section 4. From guilt to fear to collapse. Guilt, if left unresolved, never just stays guilt. It transforms. It mutates. And its most destructive form is fear. At first, guilt whispers. It reminds them in small ways, an uneasy feeling, a restless night, a sudden memory they can't shake. But over time, guilt begins to grow teeth. It turns into fear. Fear of being exposed. Fear of the truth slipping out. Fear of silence itself. Because silence leaves them alone with their thoughts. This fear is not a passing emotion. It becomes a state of living. Psychologists call it hypervigilance, a constant scanning of the world for threats. Imagine living like that. Every text notification sparks anxiety. Every quiet glance in a meeting feels like judgment. Every moment of silence becomes unbearable because it forces them to confront themselves. And here's the irony. The fear doesn't make them smarter. It makes them sloppy. Fear steals clarity. It drives impulsive reactions, rash decisions, and nervous overreactions that expose what they were trying so hard to hide. I once knew a man who betrayed his business partner. At first, he acted confident, even arrogant, telling people he had made the smarter move. But when that partner went on to succeed without him, the fear kicked in. He started badmouthing, over-explaining, attacking preemptively, even when no one was accusing him of anything. And the irony? Those very behaviors exposed him. His fear revealed the truth louder than any words his partner could have spoken. That's what guilt does when it turns into fear. It hijacks the mind. It erodes the ability to think clearly. And the collapse begins. It starts subtly. Relationships weaken. Why? Because real connection requires honesty, vulnerability, and presence. But a guilty, fearful person can't bring those things to the table. They're too busy hiding, too distracted scanning the room for threats. Friends sense something is off. Colleagues lose trust. Family members feel distance but can't explain why. One by one, bonds fray. Then comes the reputation. Reputation is like glass, clear but fragile. And when fear runs the show, people overcompensate. They try too hard to look trustworthy, too desperate to defend themselves against accusations that don't exist. Slowly, others notice. Quiet doubts start to spread. Gossip grows. Partnerships dissolve. Opportunities vanish. And just like that, the reputation they clung to begins to crack. And finally, the mind itself begins to collapse. Living in constant fear is exhausting. The body pumps stress hormones like cortisol day after day, wrecking sleep, draining energy, and wearing down the immune system. The mind, under that stress, becomes chaotic. Long-term thinking shrinks. Impulse takes over. They make reckless choices, financial, emotional, even moral, that dig the hole deeper. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, once said, "A guilty mind is full of turmoil." And you can see it everywhere in those who once believed they had escaped consequence. On the surface, they may still smile, they may still post pictures of success online, but beneath it all, their conscience is eating them alive. And here's what you must remember: this collapse is not your doing. You don't have to lift a finger. You don't have to plot revenge. This is a chain reaction they started the moment they chose betrayal, cruelty, or deceit. You are not the executioner. They are. Your silence, your detachment, your choice to keep walking forward, these are not acts of weakness. They are acts of strength. Because while they're sinking under the weight of guilt that turned into fear, you are rising. You're not trapped in their chaos. You're not tied to their collapse. You're free. So when you find yourself wondering, will they ever pay for what they did? Understand this: they already are. Every restless night, every broken bond, every anxious glance over their shoulder, that's the cost. That's the collapse. And it's not dramatic like in the movies. It doesn't always come as a sudden downfall. More often, it's a slow erosion, like the foundation of a building crumbling quietly underground. By the time the collapse becomes visible to others, it's already been happening for years inside them. That is the true price of guilt turned into fear. It destroys from the inside out, not because you demanded it, but because life, conscience, and truth always deliver justice in their own time. Section 5. The cycle of obsession. When guilt lingers too long, it rarely stays in the shadows. Eventually, it evolves into something even darker: obsession. At first, they try to ignore it. They tell themselves, "I've moved on. I don't think about them anymore." But here's the paradox of the human mind: the harder you try not to think about something, the more your brain forces it back into focus. Psychologists call this the ironic process theory. You try to bury the thought, but the act of burying it keeps it alive. That's why the people who wronged you often end up watching you more than ever. Quietly, secretly, from the shadows, they scroll through your social media at odd hours. They ask mutual friends subtle questions about you. They convince themselves they're just curious. But it's not curiosity, it's obsession. And the more they see you thriving, the deeper the torment grows. Every sign of your peace, every smile, every success, every new chapter in your life, becomes a dagger in their conscience. Because in your growth, they see the truth they cannot escape: you didn't need them. And you became stronger without them. I once knew a man who broke off an engagement in the coldest way possible. No explanation, no closure, just silence. He walked away, thinking he had control, thinking she'd collapse without him. But months later, when his ex-fiancée started a business and began speaking at industry events, he couldn't stop watching. He'd check her page late at night, scrolling endlessly, looking for cracks, for signs she was struggling. But he found none. And every achievement she posted, every photo of her confidence, cut deeper than any words of revenge could have. That's obsession. The prison guilt builds when denial fails. And it doesn't just torment the mind, it consumes their life. Here's the dangerous spiral. Obsession drains focus. It eats away at energy. A guilty, obsessed person can't give 100% to their work because part of their mind is always circling back to you. They can't be fully present in relationships, because the ghost of what they did to you keeps interrupting. Their health suffers, stress rises, sleep declines, and slowly, they unravel. It's self-destruction in slow motion. They're not being punished by you. They're punishing themselves every time they give in to the obsession. And here's the most ironic part: the more damage they do to themselves, the more they secretly blame you, even though you've done nothing. Even though you've already moved on. In their mind, your absence becomes the scapegoat for the chaos they created. But Stoicism teaches us a powerful truth: you are not responsible for their downfall. You are not the architect of their destruction, they are. Your only task is to guard your peace, to stay focused on your path, to keep building a life of meaning and clarity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts." And while their thoughts are consumed by guilt and obsession, your thoughts can be rooted in growth, gratitude, and resilience. So the next time you ask yourself, do they ever think about me? Do they ever regret what they did? Understand this: yes, they do, maybe more than you imagine. But what matters is not their torment. What matters is your freedom. Because while they are locked in a cycle of guilt, right-pointing arrow obsession, right-pointing arrow self-destruction, you are free to rise above it. Your silence, your peace, your detachment, they are the mirror that reflects back to them what they lost. And that reflection is unbearable. That's why the cycle of obsession always ends the same way: collapse. Their work suffers, their relationships suffer, their health declines, and at the center of it all, the one thing they can't escape is themselves. You don't have to intervene. You don't have to teach them a lesson. Life is already teaching it every single day. Their obsession is the sentence. Their decline is the justice. Meanwhile, your greatest revenge is not revenge at all, it's thriving without them. Section 6. Lessons from Stoic philosophy. The ancient Stoics understood something we often forget. The greatest battles in life are not fought out there in the world, they're fought within the mind. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher, once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." In other words, your inner world paints every part of your outer life. If your thoughts are rooted in guilt, fear, and deception, your soul cannot escape that stain. And eventually, it shows up everywhere: how you treat others, how you carry yourself, even how you sleep at night. Seneca, another Stoic thinker, said it bluntly: "A guilty mind is full of turmoil." And isn't that the truth? We've all seen it. Someone wrongs another, and even when they pretend to be confident, there's restlessness in their actions. They talk too much. They defend too quickly. They avoid eye contact. Why? Because guilt is not a quiet passenger, it is a storm raging inside them. No matter how calm the surface may look. Epictetus put it another way: no man is free who is not master of himself. And this, my friends, is the ultimate lesson. Freedom doesn't come from escaping punishment. It doesn't come from avoiding consequences. Real freedom comes from discipline, from integrity, from living in alignment with your values. The person who betrays others may look free on the outside, but they are shackled on the inside. Shackled to guilt, shackled to fear, shackled to the chaos they created for themselves. Now, let's turn the lens back to you. What does this mean for your life? It means you don't have to waste your time plotting revenge. You don't need to spend your nights imagining ways to get even. Because justice is already at work. Whether you see it or not, life itself is the courtroom. And the conscience is the most relentless judge there is. I once knew a woman who carried deep anger after being betrayed. She wanted revenge. She wanted to expose every lie, to make sure he paid for what he did. But over time, she realized something. Her obsession with revenge was chaining her to the very person who hurt her. She wasn't free. She was still playing his game. Only when she let go, only when she focused on her own peace, did she discover true power. And ironically, that detachment punished him more than her anger ever could, because he could not escape himself. That's the Stoic path: to rise above, to master yourself, not others, to live in a way that your soul remains clear, unburdened, untarnished. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That's the reminder you need. 2. You can't control what others do. You can't control whether they feel guilt, or whether they confess, or whether they try to rewrite history. But you can control how you respond. You can control whether you carry their weight or drop it. You can control whether you allow their betrayal to define you, or whether you rise above it. Here's the beauty. When you walk the Stoic path, you don't just survive betrayal, you transform through it. Their cruelty becomes your teacher. Their lies sharpen your clarity. Their chaos reminds you of the value of your own peace. And in the end, you come out not bitter, but stronger, not broken, but unshakable. So what's the lesson? It's simple but life-changing. Guard your thoughts, because they shape your soul. Don't carry guilt that doesn't belong to you. Don't waste your energy chasing revenge. Life handles that better than you ever could. And above all, master yourself, because that is where true freedom begins. The people who wronged you may still be running. They may still be talking. They may still be pretending. But deep down, they are paying the price. And you? You are free the moment you decide to be. That is Stoicism in action. That is justice without bitterness. That is strength without rage. So the next time you wonder if they've escaped the consequences, remember the wisdom of the Stoics. No one escapes themselves. The guilty carry their sentence in their own soul. And you carry peace, power, and freedom. Conclusion. In the end, the greatest strength isn't found in shouting, fighting, or proving yourself to those who wronged you. The greatest strength is found in silence, in letting go, and in building a life so full, so strong, that their shadows can no longer reach you. Think about this. When you refuse to engage in revenge, you don't lose power, you gain it. Because your silence isn't emptiness, it's presence. It's proof that you no longer need their validation, their apology, or their recognition. You've stepped beyond their reach. And in doing so, you've become something they cannot face, a living reminder of the truth. That's why indifference is more powerful than hatred. Hatred still ties you to them. It still burns your energy. It still keeps you chained to their story. But indifference severs the bond completely. It says, you no longer exist in my emotional world. And that, my friend, is the deepest wound a toxic person can experience, realizing that they no longer have any power over you. While they are trapped in the prison of their own conscience, you are walking free. While they replay the past, you are building the future. While they are consumed by guilt, fear, and obsession, you are rising, calm, peaceful, unshakable. And here's the beauty. You don't need to see their suffering to know it exists. You don't need evidence. You don't need apologies. You don't need closure. Because the Stoics remind us, justice is not delivered by your hands, but by the natural law of truth. Marcus Aurelius taught that what is within your control is your mind, your actions, your response. What is outside your control, how others carry their guilt, how they collapse under it, that belongs to them, not to you. Let me share this with you. A friend once told me about a betrayal so deep it nearly broke him. At first, he wanted to fight back. He wanted to expose every lie, to take back everything he had lost. But with time, he realized something profound. The best revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was peace. It was living well. It was building a life so meaningful, so fulfilling, that the betrayal no longer mattered. Years later, the person who betrayed him reached out, still haunted, still restless. But by then, my friend had moved so far forward. He didn't even feel anger, only indifference. And that indifference was the final proof that he had truly won. This is the Stoic way. Strength without rage. Justice without revenge. Freedom without bitterness. You don't have to punish anyone. You don't have to balance the scales. Because guilt, karma, and life itself will always take care of that far more effectively than you ever could. So here's the message I want you to carry with you today. You don't need to lift a finger for justice to exist. You don't need to seek revenge to prove your worth. You don't need to watch their downfall to confirm their guilt. All you need is to choose peace, to let go of what you cannot control, and to keep building the life you deserve. Because while they are stuck reliving the past, you are free to create the future. And that is the ultimate victory. So the next time you're tempted to wonder whether they regret it, or whether they still think about you, remember this. Their guilt is already their punishment. Your healing is already your freedom. And the best revenge, the only revenge worth having, is to thrive so completely that their shadow no longer even touches your light. As the Stoics would say, justice isn't something you deliver with anger. It's the truth they carry within themselves. And you're free the moment you decide to be.